Someone who saw your soulmate yesterday is now hospitalized because of my beloved child. Someone who saw your soulmate yesterday is lying in a hospital room right now, and the reason your name became part of what happened is far stranger than anyone expected. Yesterday seemed ordinary at first. Your soulmate was seen standing outside a quiet place, staring at their phone as though they were waiting for a message that refused to arrive. But someone nearby recognized them. This person had seen your soulmate before, knew enough about their private situation to understand that something had changed, and decided to approach. What happened during the next few minutes left that person shaken. Your soulmate didn't argue. They didn't raise their voice. Instead, they said something about you so quietly that the person had to ask them to repeat it. Then your soulmate reached into their pocket and showed them something they had been carrying for weeks. The instant this person saw it, their entire expression changed. And before yesterday was over, they would be rushed to the hospital after an emotional shock no one around them fully understood. But here is the unsettling part: what your soulmate showed them wasn't the biggest secret. The person who approached your soulmate knew a detail about your connection that you were apparently never supposed to hear. At first, they tried to warn your soulmate to stop waiting, stop hoping, and finally accept that too much time had passed. Your soulmate listened without interrupting. Then came one simple question: what if you knew I already made my decision? That sentence changed the conversation. Your soulmate pulled out something small, something directly connected to you, and explained what they had been planning. The person staring back at them suddenly realized this wasn't temporary emotion. Your soulmate had been preparing to make a move that could change everything between you. But then the conversation turned. The other person admitted they had kept information hidden because they believed revealing it would create consequences they couldn't control. Your soulmate demanded to know what that meant. A name was mentioned. Then yours. And moments later, the person became visibly overwhelmed, struggling to process what had just been uncovered. They were taken for medical attention soon afterward, but before leaving, they gave your soulmate one final warning: you don't understand what they did to keep you two apart. Don't skip, because that warning opened a completely different mystery. Your soulmate didn't leave immediately. They stood there replaying those words, realizing that several moments from the past suddenly looked different. Messages that never received answers. Strange delays. Conversations that seemed to disappear without explanation. Your soulmate had blamed timing, circumstances, even themselves, but yesterday introduced another possibility. Someone may have known exactly how strongly they felt about you and quietly interfered before either of you understood what was happening. And the hospitalized person apparently knew more. Much more. Before being taken away, they had pressed something into your soulmate's hand and whispered that it contained proof. Your soulmate waited until they were alone before looking at it, perhaps afraid of what they would discover. What they found wasn't a romantic note or an old photograph. It was evidence connected to a decision made behind your back, and your soulmate's reaction was immediate. They stopped waiting. They started moving. Because whatever they had originally planned for you had suddenly become urgent. And there was one detail inside that evidence that made your soulmate realize they needed to reach you before someone else did. By the time your soulmate understood what they were holding, the entire story they had believed for months began to collapse. The proof contained a sequence of dates, copied messages, and one detail that could not be dismissed as coincidence. On a night when your soulmate had almost reached out to you, someone else had apparently stepped between that moment and what you were supposed to receive. That explained why your soulmate remembered sending something heartfelt, yet later believed you had chosen silence. But according to what was now in their hands, silence may never have been your choice. Your soulmate stared at the evidence, then immediately tried contacting the hospitalized person for answers. No response came. Only later did they learn that this person was still being examined and wasn't ready to speak. That should have stopped everything. Instead, it made your soulmate more determined, because one handwritten sentence appeared beneath all those dates: ask what happened yesterday morning before they find out you know. And suddenly, your soulmate realized the secret wasn't buried entirely in the past. Yesterday morning, before your soulmate was seen by the person who ended up hospitalized, something unusual had already happened. Someone had contacted your soulmate unexpectedly and asked a question about you. Not whether they still loved you. Not whether they missed you. The question was far more specific: have you spoken to them recently? At the time, your soulmate answered cautiously and thought nothing of it. Now that question felt completely different. Why would anyone need to know whether communication between you had resumed unless they were afraid of what might happen if it did? Stay till the end, because your soulmate then remembered another detail. The caller had tried to make the conversation sound casual, but before hanging up, they accidentally mentioned something about you that your soulmate had never told them. Something private enough to prove they had been receiving information from somewhere else. Your soulmate's hands went cold. There were now two separate people connected to the same hidden story: the hospitalized witness who wanted the truth exposed, and another person who seemed desperate to know whether you and your soulmate were getting close again. Then your soulmate noticed one final item tucked behind the evidence: a short note written directly to them. It explained why the hospitalized person had finally decided to speak yesterday. Apparently, they had carried guilt for a long time because they had witnessed one crucial moment and remained silent. They had convinced themselves that staying out of it would protect everyone involved. But recently, they learned that the interference hadn't stopped. Someone was still watching for signs that your soulmate might return to you, and yesterday they realized another attempt was already underway. That discovery was what pushed them to approach your soulmate despite knowing the confrontation could become emotionally overwhelming. Your soulmate read the final sentence twice: if they realize I've told you, they'll try to reach your person first. And almost at that exact moment, your soulmate's phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. A message appeared containing only 7 words, but those 7 words revealed that someone had already made the first move toward you. The 7 words on your soulmate's screen were impossible to misunderstand: you should have left the past alone. For several seconds, your soulmate simply stared at them. There was no name attached, no explanation, and no obvious way to identify the sender. But the timing said enough. Someone knew about yesterday's conversation. Someone knew the hospitalized person had handed over evidence. And somehow, that person also knew your soulmate was considering coming directly to you. Instead of replying, your soulmate took a screenshot and compared the number with everything inside the material they had been given. Nothing matched, until they noticed 4 digits written beside one of the copied messages. The same 4 digits appeared at the end of the unfamiliar number. Suddenly, this wasn't a vague warning anymore. It was a connection. And what your soulmate discovered beside those 4 digits made them realize the hospitalized person had been trying to identify this individual long before yesterday. Beside the number was a single word, middleman. That changed everything. Your soulmate had assumed one person had been interfering between you, but the evidence suggested somebody else had been carrying information back and forth. Learning when your soulmate planned to contact you, discovering when you might be emotionally open to hearing from them, and then quietly influencing what happened next. But why? Your soulmate kept reading until they found a reference to an encounter from several weeks earlier. The hospitalized person had apparently overheard this middleman saying your name during a private conversation. They heard enough to understand that somebody was frightened of one possibility. You discovering what your soulmate had truly been told about you. Your soulmate's heart sank because they suddenly remembered the exact story they had been given, that you had moved on completely, wanted no contact, and would be upset if they ever returned. They had believed it. They had respected what they thought was your decision. But now there was a terrifying question neither of you could ignore: what if you never said any of it? Your soulmate stopped reading and finally did something they had been afraid to do for months. They began composing a message directly to you. No middleman. No asking someone else what you felt. No trusting another person's version of your heart. Just the truth. But before they could send it, another notification appeared, this time from someone connected to the hospital. The person who had seen your soulmate yesterday had regained enough strength to speak, and there was one thing they desperately wanted your soulmate to know. Apparently, while being taken for treatment, they remembered where the strongest piece of evidence had been hidden. It wasn't among the papers your soulmate already possessed. It was something much harder to explain away, a saved recording from the day everything between you began changing. Your soulmate immediately asked what was on it. The response came seconds later: your name, their plan, and the real reason your soulmate was pushed away. But there was one more detail. Another person was already trying to get that recording before your soulmate could hear it. That warning forced your soulmate to make a decision immediately. Instead of chasing the unknown person, they contacted the hospital again and asked one question: where is the recording? The answer was unexpected. The hospitalized witness had never kept it on their phone. They had hidden a backup somewhere ordinary because they feared exactly this situation: someone discovering they knew too much and trying to erase the proof. Only one trusted person knew where that backup was stored, and your soulmate was given instructions for reaching them. But there was a condition: they could not mention your name over the phone. That detail disturbed your soulmate more than anything else. Why had protecting your identity become so important? Then another message arrived from the unfamiliar number: don't go looking for something you'll regret hearing. Your soulmate didn't answer. They simply grabbed their keys and left, because now whoever had interfered was clearly frightened of one thing: the truth reaching you. The person holding the backup agreed to meet your soulmate in a quiet public place. When your soulmate arrived, they expected explanations. Instead, they received a small storage device and a nervous warning. Listen before you decide what to do next. Your soulmate sat alone afterward, connected the device, and found several audio files labeled only by dates. The first contained nothing remarkable. The second was difficult to understand. But the third began with a familiar voice discussing you. Your soulmate froze. The speaker wasn't describing some accidental misunderstanding. They were talking about keeping the two of you separated, carefully predicting how your soulmate would react if they believed you had rejected them. Then came the sentence that changed everything: they'll walk away on their own if they think the message came directly from the person they love. Your soulmate stopped the recording. Suddenly, all those unanswered questions had an explanation. Someone hadn't simply lied about you. They had apparently constructed a rejection convincing enough to make your soulmate disappear voluntarily. But your soulmate forced themselves to continue listening, and that's when the recording became even more personal. A second voice asked why separating you mattered so much. There was a long silence before the answer came, because if those two speak honestly, everything we've been hiding comes out. Your soulmate replayed that sentence. Once. Twice. Something huge was waiting beneath those words, because this was no longer only about keeping a relationship apart. There was another secret attached to your reunion, something the hospitalized witness had discovered and apparently felt guilty for helping conceal. Near the end of the recording, someone mentioned a document connected directly to you, followed by a date your soulmate recognized immediately. It was the exact date they had originally planned to tell you how deeply their feelings had grown. Then the audio abruptly stopped. Your soulmate checked the folder and discovered one final file, recorded much more recently. Its title wasn't a date. It was your name. And when your soulmate pressed play, the first voice they heard belonged to someone they never expected to be involved. The voice on that final recording belonged to someone your soulmate had trusted enough to confide in. Not a stranger. Not someone watching from a distance. This was a person who had listened whenever your soulmate spoke about missing you, questioning you, and wondering whether reaching out would only cause more pain. On the recording, that trusted person sounded completely different. Calm. Deliberate. They were discussing exactly how to keep your soulmate convinced that you wanted distance. Then another voice asked, "What happens if they contact each other directly?" The answer came without hesitation: "Then we lose control of the story." Your soulmate felt something inside them shift. Every comforting conversation suddenly looked suspicious. Every piece of advice to move on carried a different meaning. But the recording still hadn't answered the biggest question. What story were these people so desperate to control, and what did it have to do with you? Then came a sound your soulmate almost missed: papers moving across a table. Someone mentioned the document from the earlier recording and said it had been kept away from you because seeing it would make you start asking questions. Your soulmate increased the volume. A date was repeated, followed by a reference to a decision involving your future, something apparently made while both you and your soulmate were being fed different versions of the same situation. Then the trusted voice said something chillingly simple. They still don't know the original message was changed. Your soulmate stopped the audio again. Changed. Not lost. Not misunderstood. Changed. That single word explained why the hospitalized witness had carried so much guilt. They hadn't merely watched people interfere, they had discovered evidence that something intended for you had been altered before it reached you. And if that was true, your soulmate suddenly needed to know what the original message had actually said. The answer was hidden inside another folder on the device. There were two versions of the same message, one labeled "Sent," the other labeled "Original." Your soulmate opened the version you were apparently meant to receive first. It was vulnerable, honest, and unmistakable. Your soulmate had told you they were tired of pretending their feelings weren't real. They had asked for one private conversation, without anyone else influencing either of you. But the "sent" version was dramatically different. It sounded distant, uncertain, almost as though your soulmate had chosen to walk away. Someone had removed the very words that would have told you the truth. Your soulmate's eyes stayed fixed on the screen until their phone suddenly rang. It was the hospital. The witness wanted to speak directly, and their first words carried a new urgency. "The message isn't why I ended up here. It's what I discovered yesterday about your person." Your soulmate went silent. Then the witness revealed that someone had recently made a new move involving you, and this time, they weren't trying to separate you quietly anymore. The witness lowered their voice before explaining what they had discovered yesterday. Someone had been preparing to contact you with a completely new version of the story, one designed to make you believe your soulmate had willingly chosen somebody else and wanted you permanently out of their life. That was why the witness had rushed to find your soulmate. They knew that if this new message reached you first, the damage might become much harder to undo. Your soulmate asked the obvious question: why would anyone keep doing this? There was silence from the hospital room. Then came an answer nobody expected. Because this stopped being about your relationship a long time ago. The witness explained that the document mentioned in those recordings contained proof of a decision made using both your names. If you and your soulmate ever compared what each of you had been told, you would immediately notice that the dates, messages, and explanations didn't match. And once you noticed that, another secret would become impossible to hide. Your soulmate demanded to know what was inside that document, but the witness refused to explain it over the phone. They would only say that yesterday, shortly before approaching your soulmate, they had finally seen the original copy. What they discovered affected them so deeply that the stress of carrying it, combined with everything that happened afterward, contributed to the medical emergency that followed. "I should have told you sooner," they admitted. "I thought silence was protecting everyone." Your soulmate didn't accept that easily. Months of confusion had been built on other people's silence. But then the witness said something that changed the anger into concern. Your name appeared on the document beside information you may never have seen. And beneath it was your soulmate's name, followed by a signature that looked convincing from a distance. There was only one problem. Your soulmate had never signed anything connected to you. For the first time, your soulmate understood why somebody might be desperate to keep you apart. If the two of you stood together and compared the document with what actually happened, whatever had been constructed around your names could unravel immediately. Your soulmate asked where the original was. The witness hesitated, then admitted they had photographed every page yesterday before the situation escalated. Those images had been scheduled to send automatically if anything prevented them from finishing the conversation. Your soulmate checked their phone. Nothing had arrived yet. Then, while they were still speaking, a notification appeared. 6 image files. No message. No explanation. Your soulmate opened the first photograph and recognized your name immediately. The second contained the questionable signature. But the third page made them stop breathing for a moment, because beneath a paragraph describing an agreement neither of you remembered making was the name of the person who had authorized it. And that name belonged to someone who had been standing much closer to your story than either of you ever realized. Your soulmate recognized that name immediately, and suddenly several harmless-looking moments from the past became impossible to ignore. This was someone who had repeatedly offered to help whenever communication between you became complicated. Someone who always seemed to know when you were pulling closer and when your soulmate was beginning to hope again. Your soulmate enlarged the photograph and studied the authorization line. The document appeared to claim that both of you had agreed to let this person handle a private matter on your behalf, but your soulmate knew that was false. They called the hospitalized witness again and asked how this document had ever been used. The answer came carefully: it hadn't been created to steal anything from you or physically harm anyone. Its purpose was manipulation. It gave the person at the center of this story something that looked official enough to convince others they were speaking with your permission. And suddenly your soulmate understood how so many people had confidently repeated things about you that you may never have said. But the fourth photograph exposed something even bigger. Attached to the document was a timeline of conversations, including dates when your soulmate had attempted to reach you. Beside several of those dates were handwritten notes: redirected, handled, and do not connect. Your soulmate's stomach dropped. This wasn't one impulsive lie. Someone had apparently been tracking opportunities for the two of you to communicate and stepping in whenever those opportunities became too dangerous to the story they had created. Then your soulmate reached the most recent entry. It was dated yesterday. Beside your name were 3 words: contact before tonight. That matched exactly what the witness had warned about from the hospital. Someone intended to reach you before your soulmate could. And underneath that entry was a second instruction your soulmate hadn't expected: if they ask about the original message, deny everything. Whoever wrote this already knew the hidden message might be discovered. The sixth and final photograph contained no signatures or timelines. It was simply a handwritten page from the hospitalized witness, photographed alongside the document. Your soulmate read it slowly. The witness explained that they had once believed the person controlling the communication was preventing unnecessary heartbreak. They had accepted explanations without questioning them and even helped pass along information they now understood was misleading. Yesterday, however, they discovered something that changed their mind completely. You had apparently tried to get the truth to your soulmate too. There had been a message from your side, one your soulmate never received. The witness had found a saved copy, and the words inside proved you hadn't simply disappeared or stopped caring. Your soulmate immediately asked where that message was. Before the witness could answer, another call appeared on your soulmate's screen. This time, it wasn't an unfamiliar number. It was the very person whose name appeared on the authorization line, and they opened the conversation with 5 words: I know what you found. Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. They let the silence stretch, waiting to hear what the caller would reveal without being prompted. Finally, the voice said, "You're seeing pieces without understanding why any of it happened." That sentence told your soulmate everything they needed to know. The document was real, the altered messages were real, and this person was no longer pretending otherwise. Your soulmate asked only one question. Where is the message they sent me? The caller tried to redirect the conversation, insisting that choices had been made to prevent confusion and protect people from getting hurt. But your soulmate refused to follow them there. Again, where is their message? Another silence. Then came an admission. Your message had been intercepted before your soulmate ever saw it. The caller claimed it would have complicated everything. Your soulmate's voice changed. Months of doubt suddenly condensed into one painful realization: you had tried to reach them, and someone they trusted had decided they had the right to keep that truth hidden. The caller then made a mistake. While defending what happened, they mentioned a phrase from your missing message. Your soulmate caught it instantly because those exact words appeared nowhere in the documents they had received. You said they were ready to tell me everything, your soulmate interrupted. Everything about what? The caller went quiet. Your soulmate pressed harder, and eventually another piece slipped out. Apparently, your message hadn't merely expressed feelings. You had begun questioning why people around you seemed to know private details about your soulmate before you told them anything. You had noticed inconsistencies too. You were starting to suspect that conversations were being filtered, and you wanted to meet your soulmate privately to compare what each of you had actually heard. That meeting was precisely what someone couldn't allow. Because if it happened, both sides of the manipulation would become visible at once. Suddenly the entire timeline made sense. You hadn't been drifting away from your soulmate. You had been getting dangerously close to discovering the truth. Then your soulmate heard movement on the other end of the call, followed by a hurried warning: don't contact them tonight. Give me 1 day to explain. But your soulmate had already spent too many days living inside somebody else's explanation. They ended the call and immediately returned to the hospitalized witness. This time, the witness gave them the location of your original message. A copy had been stored with one final piece of evidence. Something the witness had found only yesterday morning, moments before seeing your soulmate. It was a response written by your soulmate after your message was intercepted. A response they believed had been delivered to you, but apparently never was. 2 messages. 2 people reaching toward each other. Neither one receiving the other's truth. And when your soulmate finally opened both copies side by side, they discovered the same unusual sentence hidden inside each. Words neither of you could have coordinated, words proving that even while separated, you had both been trying to arrange the exact same meeting on the exact same day. That matching sentence destroyed the last possibility that everything had been an innocent misunderstanding. Both messages said, in almost the same words, "I need to hear the truth directly from you." Your soulmate read yours first, then their own response, and realized something almost unbearable. You had both chosen the same day, the same general place, and nearly the same time to finally speak without anyone between you. Yet neither of you arrived believing the other was coming. Somewhere between those 2 messages, someone had changed the plan. Your soulmate searched the saved files and discovered 2 follow-up notices sent separately to each of you. Yours claimed your soulmate had cancelled. The one sent to your soulmate claimed you had changed your mind. For months, each of you may have carried the same wound, believing the other person had walked away. But one detail in the metadata exposed something new. The cancellation notices had been created before either of your original messages was even supposed to be delivered. Your soulmate immediately called the hospitalized witness again. This time, the witness didn't hesitate. They admitted yesterday's discovery had been much larger than a hidden document. They had found an old backup containing the original communication history, including timestamps proving the false cancellations were prepared in advance. That meant whoever orchestrated this hadn't reacted after seeing your messages. They had expected both of you to try reconnecting. That's why I went looking for your soulmate yesterday, the witness explained. They wanted to confess everything before another planned interference could happen. But while showing your soulmate the first pieces of evidence, the witness became overwhelmed by the weight of what they had helped keep hidden and later required hospital care. Still, one question remained unanswered: how had someone known you would both choose that particular day? The witness paused, then revealed that a private conversation had been overheard shortly beforehand. Someone close to the situation had heard you say you were finally ready to stop listening to everyone else. That revelation changed your soulmate's next move. They stopped trying to understand the entire conspiracy before contacting you. There was now enough proof to know one thing with certainty: trusting intermediaries had cost both of you too much already. Your soulmate opened your conversation, typed several sentences, deleted them, and started again. No accusations. No complicated explanation. Just a request to speak directly and compare what each of you actually remembered. Their finger hovered over send. Then the hospitalized witness suddenly interrupted with one final warning. Wait. Before you send anything, check the last timestamp. Your soulmate returned to the backup and found it. A new entry had been added yesterday, after the witness had approached your soulmate, but before they were taken to the hospital. Someone had accessed the communication record again. And beside that timestamp was a note containing your name and a short instruction. They know too much now. Use the final message. Your soulmate stared at those words, because whatever the final message was, the system showed it had already been sent to you. Your soulmate's first instinct was to contact you immediately, but the witness urged them to wait long enough to identify what the final message contained. They searched through the backup until a newly created file appeared beneath yesterday's timestamp. The message was written to sound believable. Warm enough to lower your guard, painful enough to make you stop asking questions. It claimed your soulmate had discovered the truth about everything and had decided there was no reason for the two of you to speak again. Worse, it included private details only someone close to your soulmate could have known, making the message feel authentic. Your soulmate read it twice, stunned by how carefully their personality had been imitated. Then they noticed the final line. Please don't try to reach me after this. Whoever had sent it wasn't simply trying to create distance anymore. They were trying to close the door permanently before you discovered that your soulmate had never wanted it closed. But buried inside the file was a mistake. The sender had copied language from an older message your soulmate once wrote privately, and the original version still existed in the backup. Your soulmate compared them side by side and found a phrase that had been lifted word for word. That phrase had only ever been shared with one person, the same trusted individual whose voice appeared on the recording. Suddenly, there was no room left for denial. Your soulmate called them again and said, "I know you sent it." This time, the person didn't pretend. They insisted they had been trying to prevent a confrontation that would expose decisions made months ago. Your soulmate asked what they were so afraid you would discover. The answer came slowly, because once you two compare everything, you'll realize the person you blamed was never responsible. Your soulmate froze. All this time, they had believed the interference centered on one obvious person. But according to that confession, somebody else had started the entire chain, and the trusted individual had only helped maintain it. Then came the detail that made yesterday's hospitalization suddenly more significant. The caller admitted the witness had discovered the identity of that original person yesterday morning. That was the real reason they rushed to find your soulmate. They weren't only carrying evidence of altered messages, they had finally learned who had ordered the first interference and why your connection had become a problem for them. Your soulmate demanded the name, but the caller refused and abruptly ended the conversation. Seconds later, the hospital contacted your soulmate again. The witness was asking to speak, saying they couldn't keep this final piece hidden anymore. Their voice was weak but clear when they came onto the line. "I need you to understand something before I tell you who it was. Yesterday, when I discovered the truth, I realized your person was never the target at the beginning." Your soulmate went silent. The witness took a careful breath and continued, "You were." And then they revealed why keeping you away from your soulmate had been the easiest way to keep your soulmate from discovering what had been done in their own name. The witness explained that long before anyone began altering messages, someone close to your soulmate had made a decision on their behalf without permission. At first, it seemed small. A private promise, an arrangement presented to others as though your soulmate had approved it. But when you entered the picture, everything became unstable. You were the one person your soulmate spoke to differently. With you, they questioned things they normally accepted. They talked openly about their plans, their doubts, and the strange feeling that other people sometimes knew too much about their private choices. The person behind the arrangement noticed that change. If you and your soulmate became close enough to compare details, you might ask the exact question nobody wanted asked: "Did you actually agree to this?" And the moment your soulmate answered no, the entire story surrounding that hidden arrangement would begin collapsing. That was why separating you became so important. You weren't originally the secret. You were the person most likely to expose it. Your soulmate asked the witness to stop speaking in fragments and finally name the person who started everything. The witness hesitated, not from fear, but from shame. "I believed them," they admitted. "That's why I helped." Then the name came out. Your soulmate didn't respond for several seconds because it belonged to someone who had been present before you ever entered their life, someone whose advice had carried enormous weight and whose approval your soulmate rarely questioned. That person had convinced others that your growing connection was making your soulmate unstable and impulsive. In reality, the witness now believed the opposite was happening. You were making your soulmate more independent, more curious, more willing to challenge decisions being made around them. So the original person created the first false impression, that you had privately expressed doubts about your soulmate. Once that lie worked, everything else became easier. Every altered message afterwards simply reinforced a wound that had already been planted. But there was one piece your soulmate still couldn't understand. Why had the witness been so deeply shaken yesterday that they eventually needed hospital care? The answer was waiting inside the original arrangement. Yesterday morning, the witness discovered a page they had never seen before. A page showing that the person who started the deception had eventually planned to admit everything, but only after a particular event occurred. Your soulmate asked what event. The witness quietly told them to open the fifth image again and enlarge the bottom corner. There, almost hidden beneath another page, was a handwritten date. Tomorrow's date. Beside it were 4 words, "Tell them after departure." Your soulmate felt their chest tighten. Whose departure? They asked. The witness didn't answer immediately. Instead, they said something far more urgent. That's why you need to reach your person tonight. Because if I'm reading this correctly, someone believes one of you is about to leave, and once that happens, they think the truth won't matter anymore. Those 4 words changed the urgency completely. Your soulmate searched every page again, looking for anything connected to tomorrow, and finally found a travel reference buried beside the communication timeline. But it wasn't your soulmate's name attached to it. It was yours. According to the notes, someone believed you were about to leave, not necessarily forever, but long enough for another carefully manufactured silence to become permanent. Your soulmate immediately asked the witness whether the information was real. The answer was disturbing: they didn't know. The supposed departure could be another manipulation, planted specifically to make your soulmate panic or give up. But underneath the travel reference was something undeniably real, a record showing that someone had been asking questions about whether you planned to remain available tomorrow. That meant the people behind this weren't merely reacting anymore. They were working toward a deadline. And your soulmate suddenly understood why the false, final message had been sent yesterday. Instead of trusting the document, your soulmate made the simplest decision anyone should have made from the beginning: verify everything directly with you. They reopened your conversation, but before sending anything, another message appeared from the trusted person who had confessed involvement. This one wasn't defensive. It read, "Please listen before you contact them. You don't know what tomorrow means." Attached was a voice recording made only minutes earlier. Your soulmate played it and heard the person breathing unevenly before admitting something they had never said before. The planned departure wasn't originally about you leaving a city or taking a trip. It was a phrase used inside their private discussions to describe the moment you would finally be pushed completely out of your soulmate's life. Tomorrow was supposed to be the deadline. If you believed the final message and stayed silent through that date, everyone involved would consider the separation complete. But the recording contained another confession: yesterday's witness had ruined that plan by finding the original messages. Your soulmate finally saw the full shape of what had been happening. Yesterday wasn't simply the day someone saw them and later ended up hospitalized. It was the day a person burdened by months of guilt decided they could no longer watch 2 people be manipulated into believing they had rejected each other. Their medical emergency had made everything feel even more frightening, but their decision before it happened had already changed the story. They preserved the proof, exposed the altered messages, and forced hidden people to start revealing themselves. Your soulmate stopped hesitating. They typed one sentence to you. Before you believe anything you received yesterday, please ask me directly. Their finger moved toward send, but the hospital witness suddenly called again. This time, their voice carried something different. Wait. I remembered one more thing from yesterday morning. Your soulmate froze. The witness continued, the person who started all of this wasn't trying to reach you tomorrow. They were planning to meet you tonight. And according to the timestamp they had just uncovered, that meeting may already have been arranged without you knowing who was really coming.